Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh's 2024 Affordable Housing Program, or AHP and Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative webinar. I'm Rhiannon Haller, manager of the Affordable Housing Program. Before I get started, I'd like to first get everyone oriented to this platform we are using. Please note that this session is being recorded. We will move fairly quickly through the information, so please note that this webinar and the slide deck will be posted to the AHP website. All participants have been muted and videos are turned off. We have disabled the chat feature, but do encourage questions in the Q&A box you will see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Questions are viewable by all participants, and we'll answer questions as they arise. In the event that we're not able to answer your question, we'll follow up with a response after the presentation. We should also have time for questions at the end of the presentation. We are very glad that so many of our member financial institutions and affordable housing developers are able to join us today. We appreciate our partnership with you and the extremely important work you all do to support people and families in need of quality affordable housing. This webinar is designed to give you the information needed to apply for the Federal Home Loan Bank, or FHL Bank's 2024 AHP and Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative subsidy. And because AHP is highly competitive, provide you with the resources to better understand our scoring priorities and the resources the FHL Bank makes available to you to submit a successful application. Here's today's agenda. The focus is on our scoring priorities and required documentation, a feasibility, which is an important component of our review of your application, our voluntary housing grant initiative, and key dates for you to mark, the most important of which is August 8th at 5 p.m., which is when the applications are due. Joining us today are several of my colleagues. Megan Kreider, Community Investment Business Development Manager, will also be presenting. And behind the scenes are Ann Killian, Manager, Compliance and Quality Assurance, Kate Swanson, Senior Manager, Community Products, and Zinat Nadiri, Senior Affordable Housing Projects Manager, as well as several other members of our community investment here at FHL Bank. Before we begin discussing AHP, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh is one of 11 banks established under the Federal Home Loan Bank Act of 1932. Our purpose is to increase the availability of credit for residential mortgage lending, as well as investment in housing and community development. Each FHL bank is independently owned and operated, privately capitalized, and organized as cooperatives. The FHL Bank system is comprised of roughly 7,000 member institutions nationwide, and we at FHL Bank Pittsburgh serve approximately 300 members chartered in our District of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Our members borrow from FHL Bank when they need liquidity, and through this lending to our members, we generate earnings, some of which are used to fund our community investment products. All of our products are funded solely by the activity of our members and do not use any tax dollars. We'll be covering AHP as well as the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative in depth today, but we want to make sure you're all aware of our other community investment products. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out to someone on our team to connect further. The products on the left of the slide are mandated by statute. The products on the right are considered voluntary and are approved by our board of directors. Members of FHL Bank Pittsburgh have access to all of these products. The first program I'd like to mention is First Front Door. FHL Bank is required by statute to contribute 10% of its net earnings annually to fund the affordable housing program, and we set aside a portion of those, First Front Door, to help qualified first-time home buyers with down payments and closing costs. The community lending program, also statutorily required, provides low-cost advances to our members to support economic development, such as financing for small businesses, infrastructure, and community development projects located in low and moderate income census tracts. Moving over to our voluntary products, Banking on Business and Banking on Business Inclusion and Equity Fund provides secondary loans to small businesses to spur economic development. Home for Good provides grants to projects, programs, and activities to support those who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. Funding is provided by FHL Bank and our 3 state housing finance agencies. Blueprint Communities is a program that provides local leaders the tools to develop a long term revitalization strategy for their communities. The First Front Door Keys to Equity program, or KEYS, provides down payment and closing cost assistance to first time minority home buyers and first generation home buyers. More information on our community products can be found on our website, or if you'd like to discuss any of them, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the FHL Bank team. Before diving into AHP, there are a few important items I'd like to highlight. First, our maximum subsidy has been doubled from 750,000 to 1.5 million to reflect our higher AHP amount available this year, approximately 48.7 million compared to 24.6 awarded in 2023. We've also adjusted the point allocation for the community stability, special needs, homeless, and in district projects categories, and added new categories to promote rental housing development. These adjustments were made to better serve the region's housing needs, and we'll go over each scoring category in detail shortly. Also this year, we have 18 million available for the voluntary housing grant, which funds affordable housing within our district of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. As mentioned earlier, FHL Bank Pittsburgh funds AHP with 10% of our net income. AHP is a financing resource that helps FHL Bank Pittsburgh member financial institutions partner with developers to create affordable homes and local communities. AHP is a competitive process where members partner with developers to submit an application through our AHP online portal. A project may request up to 1.5 million per project with a limit of 150,000 in AHP subsidy per unit. This year, we have about 48.7 million in AHP to award. Our FHL Bank member financial institutions are crucial to AHP. You cannot submit an application to us without a member partner. It's really the AHP developer or the sponsor who completes the vast majority of the application, but members do have their own set of specific responsibilities. We are here to assist our members with any questions you may have about the AHP process from the member perspective. If you are a member and submitting an application this year, you must ensure you have access to AHP online. Members must complete the final step in the submission process. Applications are due by 5 p.m. on August 8th this year, and we do not grant extensions to the submission deadline. Sponsors are also crucial to AHP. Project sponsors are responsible for ensuring that the application is completed in its entirety and that the member has enough time to complete their portion. It's important to make sure that somebody from your organization is available to answer any clarification questions we might have during the review period, and that questions are answered in a timely manner. If your project is awarded, it's the sponsor who is responsible for submitting funding requests, as well as maintaining application commitments throughout the project's lifecycle and post completion compliance period. Consultants do not have access to projects once they are awarded. Another important responsibility is executing and recording subsidy retention agreements to secure the grant's affordability restriction. Homeownership projects must use our real estate retention agreement. Rental projects must draft a security instrument, such as a mortgage and note, that incorporates our AHP or voluntary housing grant rider. You'll need to work with your member partner and legal counsel to prepare these. Many types of affordable housing projects can be eligible for AHP and can be located in rural communities or large cities. No matter the type, size, location, or scale, all projects must comply with the AHP income requirements. AHP funds can only go to support households at 80% or less of the area median income using HUD guidelines for the area where the project is located. For example, a family of 4 in the Wilmington area in Delaware could have a household income of up to $91,750 per year and qualify for the program. There are two main components of the AHP process, a pre and post award. We will cover in today's webinar the competitive application scoring categories and documentation required, as well as key information about feasibility. Not covered today, but very important to be aware of, is the post-award disbursement process and long-term compliance and monitoring requirements based on project type. Visit our website for more information on those. All projects that receive an award will be subject to minimum draw provisions. This is important to know as AHP is a reimbursement of costs incurred. For homeownership projects, disbursement occurs after the home is built and sold or rehabbed. For rental projects, at least a third of construction must be completed prior to requesting a disbursement. Make sure you take this requirement into account when planning any bridge or construction financing. This slide covers the important documents and resources that are available or will shortly be available to you and located on our website. The most important of these is the AHP implementation plan. This document sets the requirements and policy behind the scoring and feasibility underwriting completed by FHL Bank. There are also other resources available to you, including guides and the forms for the application process. An overview of the application process is outlined here. You can begin to develop your application offline as a majority of the materials you need are available on our website. We do offer application assistance where you can schedule time with a member of our staff to review any questions you have about AHP or the voluntary housing grant. You will be able to submit a request for application assistance between April 18th, today, and May 31st. Calls will take place between May 1st and June 26th. The AHP system opens on June 27th, and applicants have until August 8th, 5 p.m. to submit their application. We then begin our review process and determine the awardees, which will be announced on December 12th. Here's a summary of the scoring categories and the points associated with them, so you can review your project, review the requirements in the implementation plan, and determine what your requested score may be. We'll review each of these categories today on the webinar, but be sure to thoroughly review the AHP implementation plan, guides, forms, and request application assistance. When you submit your application, you will answer questions in AHP Online, and your answers will determine your potential score. From there, we will review your answers and the documentation you submitted and compare it to the requirements in the implementation plan. We will either maintain your score or the application may lose points for one of two reasons. First, there's a problem with the documentation you submitted and it's not what was outlined as required in the implementation plan, or the project is not meeting the intent behind the scoring category. It's extremely important that everyone understands that you, as the applicant, must actively request the points in the AHP Online system for applicable scoring categories. If you don't request the points, we won't award the points. So when I say actively request, what I mean is that within AHP Online, the website will ask you, do you wish to be considered for XYZ points? You have to answer yes, and in most cases, answer additional questions in the system and upload any required documentation. If you answer no, that's fine if it's not applicable to your project, but we do not double check and give you credit if you did not specifically request it. I'll now cover each scoring category. Projects may receive 5 points for donated property if acquired by one of the three ways on this slide. The only document eligible for consideration to support this requested category is a property conveyance form signed by an attorney and the project sponsor. We may request other documentation like a supporting deed or sales agreement, but without a properly executed property conveyance form, the project will not be considered for these points. 5 points may be awarded to projects that have integral involvement or ownership interest by a qualified organization, such as a nonprofit or local housing authority. There's a specific form required for this category to be considered for points, and that is the sponsorship by qualifying organization form, which must be signed by the sponsor, an attorney, and the qualified organization if that organization is formed and different from the sponsor. Additional supporting documentation will be requested in AHP Online, such as an organization's 501c determination, partnership agreements, articles of incorporation, or other documentation to demonstrate the organization's qualified status. Applications may receive up to 20 points for income targeting. More points are attributed to projects that reserve a higher number of units to households with lower incomes. There are different calculations for the score for homeownership versus rental projects. At application, no documentation is required except for projects that are rental rehabilitation that are currently occupied, in which case you will have to submit your rent roll using our tenant income workbook. Income is one of the foundations of AHP. It's important to understand how and when to qualify. Our income guidelines are on our website, and the times of determination of qualification are listed here on the slide by project type. Currently occupied rental projects may have different timing requirements for income qualification depending on whether or not there is an approved relocation plan as part of the project. Reserving units for individuals facing homelessness is a scoring priority. Up to 7 points may be awarded to eligible projects. If 50% or more of units are reserved for homeless households, 7 points are awarded. If less than 50%, but above the minimum of 20% are reserved, then 3.5 points are awarded. At application, no documentation is required, but it will be required at disbursement or monitoring. Make sure you refer to our definition of homelessness in the implementation plan. The populations with special needs and or military veterans category is structured like the housing for homeless populations category. The more units reserved for individuals with special needs or military veterans, the more points to a project. Either 3.5 or 7 points can be awarded based on the percentage reserved. Again, no documentation is required at application, but will be required for applicable households at disbursement or monitoring. Make sure you refer to our definitions for this category in the implementation plan. Projects that have at least 75% of sites located in rural areas defined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture may be eligible for 5 points. There are specific documents required for this category. Applicants with known sites have the choice of providing the bank certification form for all applicable site addresses signed by a USDA representative or using the USDA's website printout for each qualifying address. Projects with unknown sites committing to at least 75%, ultimately qualifying as rural, must provide the signed certification form. In an effort to support housing for the most cost burdened, rental projects that will reserve at least 20% of the project's total units for extremely low income households, which is 30% or less of the area median income, may receive 4 points. Documentation of income for the project is extremely important and will be requested at various times throughout the project's life cycle, but is not required at application. Projects that not only provide housing, but have expansive programs or services that empower the project's residents may receive up to 6 points. Applicants may request as many points as applicable, but a maximum of 6 can be awarded. For each service the project will provide, a separate FHL Bank Empowerment Memorandum of Understanding is required. This MOU certifies that the sponsor and the service provider commit to the service for the residents. Projects that help to stabilize the community may receive up to 15 points. There are 6 different subcategories that make up this overarching scoring category. The first is community planning. 3 points may be awarded when the project has the majority of its sites, or 75%, located within eligible plan's bounds and must meet targeted priorities as outlined within that plan. Plans must be approved or have been updated within 10 years. The community planning certification form is required to be submitted with the application. A project that is rehabilitating existing properties may receive 3 points. Owner-occupied rehabilitation projects fit into this category. Other types of projects that may be considered eligible are rental rehab or for sale homeownership rehab, as long as at least 75% of units are rehab and the hard rehab costs must be greater than $25,000 per unit. This number is derived from the AHP financial feasibility workbook that you submit with your application on the hard construction cost line item within the cost breakout tab. No other documentation is required at application. If a property is of historic significance as defined by the project's State Historical Preservation Office, 2 points may be awarded with a properly executed Property of Historic Significance form. The project must also have hard rehabilitation costs per unit greater than $25,000. For any Pennsylvania project, please refer to our AHP application guide when available for Pennsylvania State Historical Preservation Office's form submission requirements. 5 points may be awarded to rental projects that are preserving existing subsidized housing. These projects must be within 2 years of permitted repayment or expiration of the restricted use requirement. Preserved units must be at least 75% of the total project, and hard rehab costs must be greater than $10,000 per unit. The preservation of existing subsidized housing form is required to be signed by the subsidy's original funders. Up to 10 points may be awarded for eligible projects that select the owner occupied rehab category in the application. Rural owner occupied rehab projects are eligible for 10 points, and other owner occupied rehab projects are eligible for 8 points. Projects may receive points for both this category and the rehab of existing properties category. Now, while no documents are required for this owner occupied rehab category, note that to be eligible for the 10 points, you must submit the required documentation for the rural category that was discussed earlier. New for this year, projects supporting rental housing development may receive 5 points. Any rental project is eligible for this category. For sale, owner occupied, and rental projects that have an affordability period of at least 30 years and include the required elements on this slide may be eligible for 5 points. Owner occupied projects must use a community land trust or other shared equity model. Rental projects must use a community land trust. You must upload the sustained affordability form applicable to your project type to certify these aspects. In an effort to support development in low income minority areas which have great affordable housing needs, projects may receive 4 points if located in a low income minority area as determined by FHL Bank Pittsburgh. At least 75% of the property census tracts must be located within eligible areas. A list of eligible tracts will be available on our website in May. Please note that the list has changed from prior years to reflect the most recent decennial census. Another requirement to be considered for points under this category is that the project also must meet the community planning criteria under community stability, which was previously covered. Projects must actively request these points in AHP Online. The project should submit the Federal Financial Institution Examination Council, or FFIEC, verification of the project site census tract for all qualifying addresses from the year 2023 or 2024. It's important to select one of these years when pulling this information for each qualifying address to align with the census tracts in our list of eligible areas. For any sites unknown, the sponsor must certify in AHP Online that the project will meet these requirements. Projects that receive points for the low income minority area category and are creating new homeownership for sale opportunities in these qualified areas may receive 6 points. Rehab of existing owner occupied properties in this area may receive 3 points. No documentation is required for the specific category, but will be driven based on your application type and the answers to the low income minority area scoring category. The next category is residential economic diversity, which allows for projects to request points if at least 75% of the project's properties are located in census tracts with a median family income greater than or equal to 100% of the area median income as published by FFIAC. Documentation to be submitted with the application includes the FFIAC census tract for all qualifying addresses with the most current information for the tract's median income. An example of the documentation to be submitted with the application is on this slide. Note that the highlighted tract's median family income shown in this scenario is above 100% and therefore can be considered eligible. If you are completing a project with all its units located in Pennsylvania or West Virginia, you are eligible for 5 points. Projects in Delaware are eligible for 7 points. Applicants must actively request consideration for these points by answering yes, you wish to be considered in AHP Online. FHL Bank Pittsburgh will not award points if an application did not request them. The final scoring category, new for 2024, is rental development funds committed. Rental projects with at least 50% of net permanent sources committed at the time of the AHP application due date may receive 5 points. Net permanent sources is your total permanent sources of funds, excluding your AHP request, any funding provided by the sponsor or a related party, and any reinvested developer fee. In the example on this slide, the project would need to have either the state or federal grant committed to receive points. Please note that the project must have a source that qualifies as net permanent to be eligible for points. Additionally, make sure that you include clear evidence of firm commitments in the commitment letter section of the application. As mentioned before, even though a project may request points, points are not guaranteed and they're subject for removal by FHL Bank Pittsburgh, who determines the final score. Some common mistakes we see on applications are listed on this slide. It's critical to slow down, plan ahead, thoroughly review the implementation plan, seek application assistance, and use your resources. We highly recommend having another set of eyes review the documentation prior to making the application final to ensure you've submitted all required elements as outlined in the implementation plan and that you've actively requested the points you want us to consider for your application. We make determinations based on the information you provide within the application. So if documents are unclear, forms are missing, third-party signatures are missing, or costs are unclear, it may negatively affect the application. So for example, in the past, projects have lost points for donation for uploading a deed but not the property conveyance form, or uploading a sustained affordability form that doesn't have the required signatures. Megan Kreider will cover feasibility next.
Thank you, Rhiannon. So the second part of our review is called feasibility, and it really is equally as important as scoring. A lot of times applicants get so caught up in the scoring component of the application process that they overlook the feasibility requirements. You need both to get an award. Every year, there are a few applicants that score competitively high enough to be considered for funding, but during our feasibility underwriting process, they do not pass this portion of the review, and therefore they do not receive an award. Last year, this affected 4 applications specifically. So upon feasibility review, we at the Federal Home Loan Bank may deem the project unfeasible. We could require a subsidy or unit reduction to the project, or add conditions that must be satisfied prior to releasing any committed funding. So let's talk about our feasibility review process. During feasibility, we're going to take a look at your project and compare it specific to the specific feasibility criteria that's outlined in our implementation plan. We only complete a feasibility review on the highest scoring projects in the competitive running for the funding. And we understand that additional information we request can be a lot, but this information is what we need to truly know and understand the nuances and particulars of your project and to ensure the best use of our limited AHP dollars. So we ask that you respond as thoroughly and quickly as possible. If you score competitively and you have the opportunity to address feasibility questions that we may have, for example, if you're outside of a guideline, you should be prepared with a reasonable answer with backup documentation if available and have that discussion with us. Remember, being outside of a feasibility guideline does not necessarily mean that your project is ineligible, but it will certainly mean we're going to ask questions about it. You as the project sponsor should understand your project's feasibility analysis as part of your application submission process, meaning you should be viewing your project through our guidelines and reviewing the feasibility guidelines tab within the feasibility workbook that must be completed as part of the application. Ultimately, it is the decision of FHL Bank to make exceptions to the feasibility guidelines, which are then recommended to our board for approval. As mentioned on the previous slide, projects must score competitively and pass feasibility to be awarded that AHP commitment. FHL Bank will evaluate competing applications using the feasibility guidelines from that implementation plan. So these guidelines are used as a benchmark for evaluating projects during application funding rounds and include a review of the following. Need for subsidy. Are your costs reasonable? Have you secured sources to fund your project? Is there a gap between the two that AHP could fill? Cost reasonableness. How are the costs for your project determined? Are they reasonable? Do they meet our thresholds? We use cost reasonableness guidelines established on our website to help us guide the decision making. Ability to proceed. The bank will evaluate a project's ability to draw or secure funds within 12 months of award, meaning we'll be reviewing site control, zoning clearances, environmental issues to make sure none of these items are going to prevent the project from progressing forward in a timely manner. Market demand for the project. Homeownership projects with 12 or more units and rental projects with 20 or more units must have a formal market study completed. For more detail on this, including the types of projects that do not require a market study, make sure to review the implementation plan. Our implementation plan outlines projects that are exempt from our formal market studies, but we will still need to demonstrate that market demand, so you'll need to submit that third-party documentation as outlined in our implementation plan. Development team capacity. The bank will evaluate the capacity of the sponsor and the development team in completing and operating these proposed projects within FHL Bank's specified project milestones and timeline requirements. Sponsors must explain the development team's experience as a whole with affordable housing development as part of the application, as outlined on our sponsor experience form. All projects are required to be complete within 4 years and must incur eligible costs and draw down on the grant within 2 years to maintain compliance with our policies. So your experience forms should help to explain how you will meet these specified timeframes. Development teams with limited experience or sponsors with current compliance issues may be contacted by us at the Federal Home Loan Bank for further information to confirm your capacity to complete the project within the specified timeframes. If awarded, we may condition projects to work with an experienced co-developer or be restricted from drawing down on funds until certain project milestones are met. If this is the case, the sponsor will be informed of any such conditions prior to making the award. As outlined in the implementation plan, sponsors with limited capacity may have their subsidy request or unit count reduced at the sole discretion of FHL Bank Pittsburgh. The sponsor will be informed of any such reductions prior to us making the award. I'd like to cover some common feasibility issues that we see. Unexplained high costs outside of our cost reasonableness guidelines. We recommend you proactively compare your costs to our thresholds and be able to explain your project, your costs, how they're typical or specific to your project area or type. No need for the HP subsidy requested. So projects must have a gap. Or for example, if the project has a related party transaction, we will need to make sure that there is no excess profit being made that could be used to support the project and therefore remove the need for the HP subsidy. Unexplained feasibility guideline issues. If you can't provide a reasonable explanation and justification for something outside of our feasibility guidelines, we will not be able to approve it. It is so important to be prepared to explain any project costs that don't meet our guidelines. Not able to proceed. So we do want to see these projects ready to move forward and draw funds incurred on those expenses that you have within 12 months of approval. Changing financials during our feasibility review period are a red flag for us. It makes us question if the project is fully vetted and ready to move forward. Rental projects need to demonstrate financial viability for 15 years, at least 15 years of operation. So we'll ask questions like, does your project have substantial cash flow to support itself? We highly recommend you upload your financial feasibility workbook early on in the application process when the system opens and you have that ready to go. Do not wait for that to be your last document. What happens is the system will open up additional questions based on what you have input in your financial workbook. So you will want to allow yourself time for any potential troubleshooting with uploading that to the actual AHP online system, as well as allow yourself time to adequately answer any additional questions that may be asked for your project. So how can you prepare for feasibility? The number one way to prepare is to know your project in relation to our Federal Home Loan Bank AHP feasibility guidelines. We've touched on one of these points already, but do have your team assembled. Be ready to go in the event we reach out to ask additional questions. Have those documents prepared. This is going to help set you up for success. So this concludes our feasibility portion. I am going to turn it back over to Rhiannon. She's going to cover key dates and our voluntary housing grant initiative that we have available this year.
Thank you, Megan. This year, the bank is providing an additional 18 million to support affordable housing development throughout the bank's district, which includes projects located in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. These funds, called the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative, can support the same types of projects under the Affordable Housing Program and can request the same limit, 1.5 million per project, with a 150,000 per unit limit. I'd like to go over some key differences between AHP and the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative. AHP is required by statute, and the amounts available fluctuate each year based on the bank's prior year earnings. However, the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative is a discretionary offering of 18 million. AHP is eligible for projects anywhere our members do business, whereas the Voluntary Housing Grant is only available for projects in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Each state has a 4-project minimum. If there are not enough projects with a specific state to fund the minimum, then the remaining amount will be used to fund other in-district projects. Projects awarded through the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative will follow the same scoring rules and feasibility guidelines we covered earlier in today's webinar. Monitoring requirements will be similar with some exceptions, including the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative has its own subsidy agreement to execute, different retention documents, although the terms remain the same, 15 years for rental and 5 years for owner-occupied for sale projects. Owner-occupied rehabilitation does not have a retention requirement for AHP or the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative. And long-term monitoring for projects that receive voluntary housing grant funds will be limited to an annual certification of compliance. So to streamline the process, anyone wishing to be considered for the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative must apply through the statutory AHP online process. All eligible projects will be considered for AHP until the AHP subsidy runs out. Then, remaining projects that do not competitively score under AHP that are located within the bank's district will be considered for the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative. So there's no separate application process. The most important takeaway on this key date slide is to start as soon as possible. Information is already available on our website to help you apply. This includes most forms and guides you will need to complete your application. Identify a member financial institution to talk about your potential projects or request assistance in finding a sponsor or member match by completing our match form on our website. The application assistance request window opens today. This is when you can schedule time with a member of our staff to discuss your application and questions you have on scoring and feasibility. The window to request this assistance closes on May 31st. Appointments are scheduled on a first come, first served basis. Outside of application assistance calls, we will not be able to answer questions related to scoring and feasibility. However, we are always available during business hours for technical issues. On June 27th, AHP Online will open for application input, and applications are due August 8th, 5 p.m. Eastern, and we will make the award announcements on December 12th for both AHP and the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative. So to access the forums and the resource that I mentioned, please go to our webpage and click on the image that says AHP Forums and Resources. By clicking on the image, you will be directed to a page with 6 boxes where you can access our forums, guides, and webinars. So what's going to be most useful for you are the AHP application attachments, applying for AHP funding, and AHP guides and webinars. The other pages focus on the funding and compliance processes. It's important that you review all of this information prior to your scheduled application assistance appointment so that you can have a productive conversation with our staff about your application's competitiveness. The most important next steps for applicants are to register and make sure you can access our system, review the implementation plan, and find a member or sponsor partner to match with. Make sure you review the application forms and use the guide to completing the HP online application to help guide you through the online process. That's a document that's going to list all the questions you will see on the AHP online system. So even though it doesn't open up until June 27th, you can already get ahead, get prepared for everything you're going to be asked to upload and answer. And make sure that you ask for application assistance before May 31st. So our contact information is on the slide. We recommend using the general AHP email noted on the slide as the best way to contact us, as multiple staff monitor our inbox. We can usually get to emails quicker than answering the phone. If you would like to call us, our number is up there as well. There's also the direct lines for our AHP management staff on the slide as well. And again, don't worry about writing this down. The slide deck will be available on our website. So we're going to open up for questions now. And any questions that we're not able to answer will be addressed after the webinar through a follow-up email.
Yes, Brianna. So we got quite a few questions. Thank you, everyone. First question that we haven't got to yet is regarding the new category regarding rental funding commitment. Does the permanent loan for a rental project count toward that committed funds in the rental funding commitment category?
It could if there is a firm commitment.
And if someone applied last year and was not awarded and wants to apply again this year, the same project, can they find out what areas they need to work on for this year's project?
Yeah, so in order to receive that kind of assistance, submit an application assistance request form. Make sure to note the application number that you submitted last year, and you'll be able to go over the areas where maybe you lost points or could have picked up points to make your application a little more competitive this year. I'll also note, I do see that some folks have their hands raised. So if you have a question, make sure to type it in the Q&A. That way we'll be able to get to it. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer questions via audio, so make sure to type it in the chat.
And Rhiannon, if you don't mind just giving a brief overview of what people can do to request application assistance and how to go about scheduling an appointment.
Yeah, great question. So if you go to our website, fhlb-pgh.com/AHP, you'll see a link on the left-hand side to request application assistance. That is going to open up an Excel document that you fill out. You'll then email it to AHP@FHLB-PGH.com. That email address was also on the previous slide. And a member of staff will reach out to you to schedule a call. One thing I'd like to highlight about the application assistance form is it has a scoring tool in there, so you can go through your project specifics, and you can see what kind of score you are potentially looking at. And again, that's just for kind of planning purposes. It's probably not going to be your final score, but that's going to be a really useful tool for you, even if you're not planning on requesting application assistance. If you want to see kind of how competitive your project might be, definitely go ahead and complete that.
Hey, Rhiannon, while we're on that topic, I do see that a lot of folks have asked questions about what is our lowest funded score last year. So I do want to let folks know that it is available on our website, the history of the last 3 years running score. But take that with a caveat of we've changed scoring for this year, and we have substantially more funding available in the pool. So the way that that works, it may help you gauge and guide, but really your best conversation is going to be through requesting application assistance so that we can dig a little bit further into explaining the nuances of how that works relative to kind of where you're scoring, what points you may or may not be leaving on the table. So I did just want to address that because we saw a bunch of questions come in about that. So it is publicly available on our website. You can take a look with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
Thank
that's a
you.
great point, Megan. I noted that some people had questions about the lowest funded score for the voluntary housing grant. So that that varies state by state. So if you are interested in that information, again with the caveat that Megan noted, please send me an email or type it in the chat, and I'll make sure to follow up with you on that. But I cannot emphasize enough that the historical competitive scores are probably going to look very different than what the competitive scores will be this time around.
We had a few questions regarding how to log into the AHP system, and if people need new login information, if they haven't logged in for a while, and how they can get registered.
Yeah, so first of all, if you have previously applied to AHP, if it was several years ago and you're not sure if you still have a login, just contact us and we can look that information up for you. Sometimes all we have to do is kind of reset your password and we can get you logged in. If you know that you've never registered before, there's a guide on our website with screenshots that tells you step by step what you need to do. And if you have any questions during that process, reach out to us by phone or email and we can assist. And I definitely recommend, if you're even thinking about applying, register now, because then you'll be all set up, ready to go by the time the application opens.
Another great question came in about if someone has multiple projects that they want to apply for this year, do they need to schedule multiple application assistance appointments or schedule one for multiple projects?
Yeah, so actually I'll let Megan answer that.
Sure. Yeah, you're able to submit an assistance request per project, especially if you're looking at a rental versus a home ownership. It could be a different conversation because of our underwriting and scoring criteria. So we'll kind of monitor that in the event that we don't utilize the full time that we have scheduled and we're able to couple it together. That's fine. But I would say overall, if you are submitting multiple, it would be better to submit it as one specific request so we can keep track of that. One specific request per project. Sorry if I confused anybody there. One specific request per project, per application you're submitting.
We had a question about, do we recommend if a project will fit in the voluntary housing grant initiative or the affordable housing program?
No, there's no kind of recommendation for either one. Basically, you have to apply if you want to be considered for the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative, you have to apply for AHP. Again, the way it works is once the AHP subsidy runs out, then eligible in-district projects, that's Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, are then considered for the Voluntary Housing Grant using with a four project minimum for each state. And projects are ranked in the same way that we rank that the AHP projects. Highest scores get awarded funds first. So it's just one application process for both funding pools.
There's also a question about the match required of a sponsor. I'll just go ahead and answer. There is no match required of a sponsor for an AHP or voluntary housing grant project. And another question, is a sponsor allowed to earn a profit from the program? So this is, I think, referring to development.
That's kind of a tricky question to answer. I would definitely recommend asking for HP application assistance, but essentially, no. If you're a rental project, we're going to look at your pro forma and cash flow, and if your cash flow is showing a significant profit, you will likely not meet our need for subsidy guidelines. So, if you have more questions on that, make sure you schedule an application assistance call.
Yeah, most of the other questions are very specific. They're great questions, but I do think we might need to take that offline.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see a question about, how much time is typically scheduled for the initial assistance session. So those are 30 minutes typically. And if you need more than one assistance appointment, that kind of depends on how many projects you have to discuss and how different they are from each other. But typically 30 minutes per appointment.
Um,
And go ahead, Megan.
I just saw one other one come in that I could address. Sorry, two more. Is this a 1-year or multi-year grant? So this is a one time to apply, and you have that commitment to move forward and complete your project over multiple years. So it's not like you can have 1.5 million this year, 1.5 million the next year. You get your commitment and you move forward with your development. So that answers that question. And then another one is, can funding be used for acquisition and rehabilitation of naturally occurring affordable housing projects? Yeah, it can be. So acquisition, rehabilitation, new construction, combinations thereof are eligible. The big key there is that you have to have incomes at 80% or less of the area median income for the folks that you're going to look to house and serve out of this. So if you do have like acquisition specific or acquisition as a component of AHP that you're looking to be reimbursed, it is good to get that conversation in with us through that application assistance process, because there can be some nuances to how that works.
A question that just came in about the maximum per unit hard construction cap for rehab and new construction projects.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you can find that info on our website, and I can also share the limits right now. So this question is related to what are our cost reasonableness guidelines for the 2024 funding round. So we use the guidelines as just one aspect of determining cost reasonableness. We do look at other things as well. And if you are over the cap, then we that doesn't mean that your project isn't necessarily eligible. It just means that we're going to ask for more information and maybe complete a Marshall and Swift analysis on the project. So with that said, a rental, new construction, and or rehab project, the limit is $246,000 per unit. For home ownership, new construction, For sale, $250,000 per unit. Homeownership rehab for sale, $232,000 per unit. And then for owner occupied rehab, $60,000 per unit. And again, those are guidelines. They're not hard limits. So if you are above those limits, then just be prepared to kind of explain why your costs are higher than what we're expecting to see.
Hey, Zanat, I'm sorry, before you jump in with the next question, there was one related to about this is in particular for the West Virginia market, but could really apply anywhere. So the question is, does my member bank partner have to be an FHL Bank Pittsburgh member, or can it be a Cincinnati FHL Bank member? So the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh, there's 11 of us throughout the country. We operate independently. We each have an affordable housing program, but it is unique to each Federal Home Loan Bank, and you have to work with a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh in order to apply for our funding. So there may be other financial institutions that you see in your area, in your community, but you do need to do one of two things. One, our list of FHL Bank Pittsburgh members is available on our website. You can take a look at who are those institutions, who may you have a banking relationship with, or who would you want to reach out to. Second option is to request member sponsor match assistance. If you want to do a deal, you do not know who to talk to at a member financial institution for Pittsburgh, let us know. There's a form to complete. That is our role. One of my roles and my colleague Fred Banuelos's role is to help our developers find that member who's looking to do a type of project like you may have in their own service area and community. So in the event that you don't have a partner, don't let that be a deterrent. Let us see if we can help you there. Not guaranteed. We'll certainly try and introduce you to any potential, interested member financial participation. So thank you.
Do we award projects outside of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, which is our district?
Yeah, that's a great question. So AHP goes where our members go. So as long as it's with a member, the project is with a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh, as Megan just mentioned, those projects are eligible. But note that the Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative is only for projects that are located in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and West Virginia. All right. So we are running out of time here. I do understand that there are a few questions in the Q&A that we weren't able to get to. So make sure that if we did not follow up with you, send an email to AHP at FHL, AHP at FHLB-PGH.com, and we'll follow up with you. I also, if you're listed, if your name is listed, not as an anonymous attendee, I'll be able to, follow up with you over email too. So we'll be following up with people over the next few business days here. If you have any other questions that you either weren't able to ask or we didn't get to, just please give us a phone call or email us and we'll be happy to assist. And don't forget to sign up for application assistance. And thank you again for attending our webinar, and good luck with your applications. Thank you.